Welcome, fellow bookworms, to TBR's Den. My name is Whitney, and it is time for another Monday Musings. I actually had a really great week. Reading-wise, it was great. I got a lot of reading in. I got the house cleaned, because that was, I hadn't done like a good clean in a couple weeks. So that was really great. And yeah, it was just overall a fantastic week. There wasn't a lot going on, and my brain actually cooperated, and I was able to get a lot of reading in. I did do one audiobook while I was cleaning the house, which was very helpful. And otherwise, I just had, like I said, had a fantastic week this weekend. Yesterday, so I didn't do the all-nighter sprints for William, but I went back and watched it, and I used it to read this weekend, which was very, very helpful. And I got a big chunky book read, so that was fantastic. And I think that's the last of like the more dense, chunkier books on my TBR. I think everything else from here on out should be pretty quick reads. And I got all this week and part of next week, and I have 9 books left. So we have all this week and then till Thursday of next week. And so I think this is definitely doable. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3 children's, 2 young adult, a thriller, a romance, and one like literary one that's going to be fast, and then I have the book club read, which should be a quick read for me as well. So let's talk about the books I read this past week, and then I'll get into kind of what I'm thinking of for this next week. Let me get to the start here without knocking everything over. So I did talk about this one a little bit because I was partway through it last Monday, and that's The House Saphir by Marissa Meyer. I really had a great time with this one. Where basically this is based on the French fairy tale of Bluebeard who killed his wives, and so that's what it's based on. And so we have, what are their names? Mallory, and her sister. And so Mallory and her sister, they're kind of con artists, swindlers, and their house, there's a house in town where like the first wife was murdered, and then there's an estate like outside of town. And so she does tours. Her sister does like readings and such, and then she does tours in this house where the first wife was murdered. And she gets approached by the ancestor, Monsieur Lebleu, and basically he's back, and his ancestor needs their help to banish him again. And they don't actually have magic powers. It's kind of like there's things that happened, and they have like an ability. Like Mallory can see ghosts and talk to ghosts, and her sister has an ability as well. But they don't have like what did they call it? Like just general magic, I guess. And so yeah, so they decide they're going to swindle him and such, and it kind of evolves from there. So I absolutely really love this. I like Marissa Meyer's writing. This was for My God Seer Calling. It was for demonology, so common demonic dwellings, house on the cover. And even though there's like not an actual house, the word house, and you have the steps and the front door of a house. So I counted it for that. So I believe I gave that 5 stars. Then I listened to, this is the one I ended up listening to, I got the audiobook for, and that was The Paris Library by Jennette, Skeslien, Charles. This one was for, let's see here, Restoration, Restorative Adoration, ask a friend for 5 stars, and pick one. So I didn't feel like interacting with anybody. So what I did is I have restoration for all 3 of my callings. This was for my herbology class. So herbology only had 2 books, and I read both of them. Herbology calling is done. But basically what I did, I went on Storygraph to Allison on a book breaks, Storygraph, and then I just did the first 5 stars that I saw that I owned. And this was one of those, and I listened to it. It ended up being 5 stars. So this one, I think this is one of my favorite World War II books that I've read, honestly. You're following Odile, and she is French, and she becomes a librarian at the Paris Library. And there's very kind of a slice of life aspect to this. And so you're following Odile, and then you're also going back, forward. So you're following Odile and like just before the war and then during the war. And then you're going forward to the 80s in Montana, where she is now a neighbor of this young girl, this 12-year-old girl. So you're following this 12-year-old girl and kind of going back and forth between the two. You do have a few other POVs that were thrown in, which weren't my favorite, but they did kind of add to the story. And so, yeah, you're just kind of going back and forth. And like I said, there's kind of this slice of life aspect. And I really liked how it combined the American Library in Paris and the importance of it and such, not just beyond knowledge, but also just during wartime, like there wasn't a lot of options for entertainment. And so sending books to the soldiers and such really helped them keep their sanity. And yeah, I just really enjoyed that aspect. And I liked how she tied it back around in the end. I really enjoyed that as well. So yeah, just a great book. There is a second one. It doesn't say it's part of a series, but at the end of the audiobook there was a little preview for the next one where we're following that young girl, and I forget what it's called, the Paris something. Um, and so yeah, I definitely am interested in picking that one up as well. So there's that one. Then we had my family book club's pick, which was Hunted by Darcy Coates. We're going to be discussing it this Sunday. This was for shape shifting, volume modification. Had to flip a coin, and if it was heads, you had to read less than 400 pages. If it was tails, you had to read over 400 pages. I got tails, of course, and this one is 450 pages. I ended up giving this one a 4-star. I really love like the setting and the vibe of it. um, the overall premise. Basically, you have Eileen, and she's like on this trip and such, and it's her last day, and she's in the woods, and you start off with her point of view in the chapter, and something's stalking her in these woods, and she's lost. And so then you're going back and forth between the police detective who's assigned her case and her brother, and also like one of her brother's friends. And so you're kind of going back and forth between perspectives. And I really like the way she did it. She did like the police detective was very like scientific, like what's the logical, like there's a serial killer, yada yada. And then they're kind of like there's a cryptid out here that's hunting people and stalking people. There's a monster out here. And so you don't really know the whole time like what is it, like a real person or is it a monster? And I really like that. Um, I will say I wish she had leaned more into the spooky encrypted vibes. And that's kind of what dropped it down for me. But I love like wooded hiking, something's chasing you settings. Like I love movies that do that. Like that's just kind of my cup of tea. So I really did enjoy this one. It was just kind of, I wish she had leaned a little bit more into the spooky side of things. Then we had my book for, again, God's Seer Calling. And this is Conjuration Inspiration Boost, first enticing book you see on social media. I went on Instagram and came across this book, and that's Water Moon by Samantha Sotto Yambao. I believe I ended up going with a 4-star on this book. It is going to be one of my, because the way I do my ratings at the end of the month, I do them from like least enjoyment to most enjoyment as far as star ratings. And then I have a top 3, which are books that are just really going to stick with me. And this is a book that's really going to stick with me. The reason it didn't get 5 stars is the flow of the story was really off. And so it was really hard to keep my attention there because the flow was off. There's like reflections and memories where they jump back in time, and some of those were necessary. Some of those were definitely necessary, but others really weren't, and it really messed with the flow of the story. But basically, you're following Hannah, um, and her father's retiring, and she's taking over this pawn shop. But this pawn shop is like a different world. And so people from our world end up there when they need to, and basically they can give a choice that they made that they regret. That's what they're pawning. And so anyway, she wakes up on her first day as pawn shop owner. Her father's missing. The place is ransacked. And then you have Kaishin, and he shows up and he's like, I want to help you. And so they go on this adventure, and it's very whimsical, and like the rules are different. Like you jump through puddles, and I really like kind of the dynamic. And Kaishin is a scientist, and so he's very again, you have that logical brain, and so he's like trying to understand like this whimsical world and how things work there and such. And they go on this adventure trying to find her father. And I absolutely, like I said, I absolutely loved it. It was just the flow of the story was off, and it made it really hard to fully immerse myself in it. But really, really love this. Definitely, like I said, if I didn't get 5 stars, it is going to be in my top 3 for the month. Probably the top spot, but I don't know. Obviously, I haven't finished reading yet. And then I decided to go ahead and read one of the children's books just to get something else knocked out. And so this was for Inscription, and it's Dating Intricacies, Day of the Week in the title. And this is for my Godseer calling, and I chose Early Sunday Morning, The Pearl Harbor Diary of Amber Billows, Hawaii, 1941. This is a Dear America book. I absolutely really enjoyed these growing up, and I've been collecting them as an adult. This is one I had never read before. This one, as far as the Dear America books go, I ended up giving it a 3 stars. It just didn't have the impact. Like a lot of the focus, they're initially in Washington, D.C. Her dad's a journalist, and he gets sent over. So they're constantly moving, and they find out they're going to Hawaii. So the first part, they're in Washington, D.C., and then it moves over to when they're in Hawaii, and it spends a lot of time on just like the adjustment period and making friends and such. So we're following Amber, and it's her mom, dad, and her brother. And yeah, the focus was a lot on the adjustment period and such and the move, and not so much on Pearl Harbor. And I wish it had been like the ratio had been swapped. And so less time had been spent on that and more time on the Pearl Harbor. And it just didn't have the emotional impact of some of the other Dear America books I've read. And I don't know how many I've read that are by this author, which is Barry Denenberg. But yeah, it's not until page, I can tell you, 82, and it's a 152 page book. So I don't know. I just wish less time had been spent on that, and more time on Pearl Harbor, and there had been more like definitely like talks about some horrific things, but yeah, it was just like, I don't know, it was just off for me, and it didn't have that emotional impact, and kind of the ending wasn't very satisfying. Like normally the ending, like there's either again that emotion or there's kind of this lesson to be learned, and this one didn't really have that. It just kind of like wrapped it up like, okay, now like there's limited resources, so anybody who doesn't need to be here needs to get off the island essentially, and so they leave. Um, and yeah, and then it kind of, fast forward and what happened, in the years after, but it just wasn't very satisfying. So that one only got 3 stars for me. And then we had another Necromancer book. This was another one for Conjuration. So again, inspiration boost. First enticing book you see on social media. Again, I was on Instagram. This was from a different account, but I went with Phantasma by Kaylie Smith. This one's also 5 star for me. There were some things like little issues here and there that I noticed, but I had such a great time with this that those little issues, like to me, if there's issues, if they ruin the enjoyment of the story for me, that's when it gets knocked down to a four star. But if they don't ruin the enjoyment of the story for me, then it's a 5 star. And yeah, I love this. I love that it was based on the 9 circles or the 9 levels of hell. I thought that was such a fun um, setting for the competition and such. And I did enjoy the romance. I do think like I get it's a romantasy, but I do think like some of the spicy scenes were a little like it got a little heavy-handed once that got started. Like in between each thing, there was a spicy scene, and it's like we don't need it in between every situation here. And yeah, I just really like this. So we're following Ophelia, and their mom dies. Her and her sister again. You have that sister aspect, and their mom dies, and they find out, or Philia finds out, that they're in debt and their house is about to be taken away. Her sister decides she's gonna go join Phantasma, and Ophelia figures this out, and so she goes after her into Phantasma, which is this competition. The winner gets like this boon from the devil, and so she ends up going. And Ophelia is a necromancer, and as the firstborn, she carries her family's magic and the legacy and such. And so she also has OCD, which I really like. The author has OCD, so it was done really well, and I really like that aspect of it. I will say that kind of got lost a little bit at the end as well, where like she wasn't like knocking 3 times and such, which I don't know if that was intentional on the author's part or not, because the love interest really kind of helps quiet those insidious thoughts and such. And so it might have been intentional, but it doesn't just magically go away. Like my husband helps me a lot with my anxiety and when I get overwhelmed and such, but it doesn't just go away, And so I don't know. But yeah, I enjoyed the love interest. I enjoyed them together. I enjoyed the setting. I enjoyed the competition. And it's kind of was a balance between the competition and this quest. Like she makes this bargain with this man in the mansion to help him because he's trapped there, and so it's kind of a balance between searching and finding what they need for him, doing the quest, and surviving Phantasma, and then finding her sister as well. So I really had a great time with this. This one was 492 pages, so almost 500 pages. And I think I started it. When did I start this? So it took me 4 days to read, because I started at the 16th and I read 30 pages, 41 pages on the 18th, and then yesterday I read the remaining 391 pages, and that's when I was watching, the replay of the all nighter for William, and just kind of sprinting with this. But this one, like, really had a great time with this. It was really easy just to dive in and binge read it. So that was nice. And then I did start my next read, which is my main focus starting this week off, and that was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is for My Gods So You're Calling. It's for their lore, which is ancient speculative lore, a dystopia or utopia. So my plan is to read this, and why I'm reading this, I think I'm going to go for my Necromancer calling. I'm going to go with Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. This one is for spells and incantation and fashion spells and incantation, currently on a bestseller list. And when I looked it up to see if it would work, it said it was like Sunday Times bestseller and a New York Times bestseller. So which it says right there too. She was a New York Times bestseller of I'm Glad My Mom Died, which was her memoir. So yeah, so my plan is tonight, because obviously today's computer day, I'm gonna do the video. I'm planning on doing my May. After I do this, I'm planning on doing my May TBR game to see what I'm going to be reading in May. And then so I'll probably only read this one this evening, which I'm sure everybody knows what the Hunger Games is about. But in the ruins of a place once known as North America lies a nation of Panem. Panem, and they, because there was an uprising and such, so they have to send tributes to participate in the Hunger Games. And they basically fight to the death, and then whoever the winner of their district gets like food and such. So really enjoying it. I'm only 33 pages in, but really enjoying it so far. So this is going to be tonight, and then probably tomorrow, and then I want to read Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. Why I do that, and this is about a 17-year-old girl who has an affair with a teacher, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Jennette McCurdy does with this. And yeah, so that's going to be the next focus. Like I said, I'm trying to do 1 and 1, so 1 Godseer calling and 1 Necromancer calling together. So those 2 are the first ones up. And then I only have, excuse me, got froggies in my throat this morning. So then I only have 2 more of the Godseer books, and I still have 4 of the Necromancer books. So once I finish the Hunger Games, I want to move on. I also have the lore class for my Necromancer calling. So again, dystopia or utopia. And so I'm going to read the second Hunger Games book, which is Catching Fire. Obviously, I need to read the Hunger Games first, and then I can move on to this for my Necromancer calling. So that will be next up. Even if it overlaps with half its age, I'm okay with that. And then while I'm reading that, I also want to read my for Godseer, Psionics and Divination, reading Past and Future, word time in the title, and I'm finally going to be reading An Acceptable Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is the 5th and final book in the Time Quintet, and I've never read it. So I read the original trilogy multiple times. A Wrinkle in Time is my all-time favorite book from childhood. And last semester for William, I finally read book 4, and now it's time for book 5. So this one is following Polly O'Keefe, which is Meg from the first book's daughter. And so we're now following her. And I will say the 4th book took a weird turn. I love the first 3 books in the series. The 4th book took a weird turn, but basically you have the O'Keefe family, and it's really the kind of overall theme for these books are like the battle between good and evil. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. It says Polly O'Keefe has recently moved in with her grandparents, the famous scientists Alex and Kate Murray. When she wanders into a time 3,000 years before her own, perhaps it's not an accident, as she is told by 2 druids. When a gate between Circle of Times opens, it opens for a reason. When the gate closes behind Polly and her gravely ill friend Zachary, the reasons become clear. In this desperate time, can Polly keep herself and Zachary alive until the gate reopens to bring them home? And so there's a lot of like kind of time travel and like space travel and such in the first book, and kind of like a little bit of like that sci-fi element there as well. And so yeah, I'll be reading that up next with Catching Fire. And then I'll only have one more Godseer book, which is The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. And this is for restoration, again, restorative adoration. A friend, 5 stars from her friend, and pick one. So this is another one that was on Allison from a books break list. And so this is a pretty popular thriller, and Freida McFadden is a pretty popular author, and I've never read from them. I've been collecting because somebody in my area buys their books and then donates them to the thrift store. So I've been collecting Freida McFadden books, but I've never actually read one yet, and I think this is a great place to start since it's kind of the most well-known, I would say. And it's about this housemaid who cleans the Winchester's beautiful house top to bottom. She ends up trying on the woman of the house's dress, and then she ends up getting locked in the attic. And by the time she realizes it locks only from the outside, it's far too late. So that will be up next. And while I'm reading that one, I think I want to knock out another romance, and so I'll be reading the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, by Laurie Gilmore. Again, this is for restoration, so another 5-star that was on Allison's list, but this is for my Necromancer calling. So those are the 6 books I'm hoping to read this week, and then I'll only have 3 books left for next week, 2 of which are children's books, and those will finish up my Necromancer calling. And then I have the Archivist book, the guild read, basically, because it was a book. I don't normally do the guild reads, but this one is a book I'm very interested in, so I wanted to go ahead and read it as well, but it's the lowest priority obviously. So yeah, let's see if I can hold these up for you guys. Um, this is what we're looking at. We're kind of going to be going from the top to the bottom. So yeah, 2YA, children's, a literary that's really short, it's under 300 pages, and then a thriller and a romance, which should hopefully read quickly as well. So 6 books I'm hoping to read. Like I said, I'm barely started the Hunger Games, so it's going to be most of that. And so yeah, this is what I'm hoping to read this week. And like I said, that will just leave 3 books for next week, which is Monday through Thursday. But with 2 children's books, it should be, put those down real quick. It should be really doable. And like I said, the book club read is like a fantasy. It's going to be really quick as well. So I got through most of my denser books, and I'm really hopeful that I am going to be able to complete Aurelium. I was a little worried with the way the month started out, but now looking at this past week and how I did, and what I have left, I think I'm going to be able to do it, which makes me very happy. So yeah, I'm going to get to seeing what I'm reading in May now because I like to know ahead of time, and I used to when I was doing my TBR game each month. I would do it a month in advance. Basically, I would do it at the beginning of the month for the next beginning of the previous month for the month I was playing for. Um, and so yeah, we only got about a week and a half left of April, and I'm ready to know what I'm going to be reading for May. I'm hoping to get some series books in there, and we'll just have to see how it goes. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, if any of these books are on your radar. Let me know that down in the comments below. If you just want to let me know you're here and you're helping to support the channel by commenting, you can always leave a rabbit or any type of animal emoji, maybe a bird for the Hunger Games. That would be cool. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.